Welcome to Hope Blooms, a podcast from the Early Pregnancy Loss Association.
At EPLA, we seek to support women and families suffering early pregnancy loss by providing resources, education, and community. It is our vision that no one suffers miscarriage alone. Welcome back to Hope Blooms. I'm Emily Carrington, EPLA's Executive Director.
And I'm Stephanie Gordon, a board member for the EPLA.
And today we are going to talk about our vision for the world. What a world would be like. This is sort of like I've said, a perfect, imperfect world. So the world where miscarriage still happens, which is unfortunately going to be our world, but where people are cared for properly and that no one suffers alone. So what would that look like?
Well, Emily and I were just talking. We both have two daughters.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the statistic of 1 in 4, that would mean one of our daughters.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. At least. And the statistic is 1 in 4 pregnancies.
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
So that's one of our daughters if they all only have one baby.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as they start having more babies.
Mm. And I also have a son. So just bringing awareness to him.
Yeah. I think let's talk about that a little bit. What was your awareness of miscarriage?
Growing up, miscarriage wasn't really anything we talked about.
Mm-hmm.
I know that my mom never experienced a miscarriage. So I had the basic knowledge of course, there's a chance that every pregnancy can end in miscarriage, but I never, took the time to really educate myself on the topic. So I would say slim to none.
Yeah.
I know that my grandma lost a baby when she was about 20 weeks along. And it was something that she never really talked about openly. So I guess I knew of the possibility, but I didn't take the time to, really educate myself.
Yeah. And I think that's hard. I don't know that it's necessarily every family's duty, right, as a parent to make sure our children know every bad thing in the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
I want to start there. But at the same time, there seems to be a particular quietness around miscarriage.
Very.
And then so it never happened to your mom, but it also wasn't talked about. And I think, it wasn't something I knew about with other families either.
Right.
And my mother had a loss and she talked to me, but I feel like there's other things we sort of suffered in community. And my mom's loss was before I was born. But I feel like there's other things we've sort of suffered in community, and miscarriage wasn't one of those things growing up.
I agree with you.
So there wasn't that kind of awareness. So have you talked to your children about your loss?
I have.
Yeah.
Jack is, 3, almost 4, so he doesn't really
3-year-olds are
fully understand.
Not quite.
But
yeah.
I have talked to my daughters about it. My daughter, my oldest, will be 10 in May, and Flora is 8.5. So they are aware of what miscarriage is and what we went through and where their sibling is buried underneath our angel tree. And, Eloise, who's my oldest, she has had some questions like why. And that's hard because we don't know why, right? We don't personally know why. We could have some pretty solid guesses as to why, but yeah, so I've talked to them about miscarriage, not every detail. Yeah. Right. But, they would know what a miscarriage is if someone were to ask them.
And what I think is so beautiful, and in this sort of envisioning of a world, my children have been, I told my 6-year-old probably around 4, and she was a little too young to get it, but she's also a particularly verbal and logical 6-year-old. My current almost 4-year-old would have no idea what I'm She's
second child.
She's so much. She's so great. She just loves everything.
Yeah.
But my oldest, we probably actually talked about it closer to 3. She was very verbal. I think we talked about it before she was 4. And just in a really basic, like, you had a brother, And I only told her about the one I could identify gender, like, you had a brother. And then we sort of moved on from there. And I think at this point now she knows I've had multiple losses. I didn't want to lie to her that it was only one, but I also wanted to give her something that she could hold on to.
Yeah.
And it's so beautiful. And she's my sort of dark, dour child, but it is so beautiful because she will say things like, at the time I had a 3 and a 1-year-old. So we were deep into double stroller land. And she's like, Mommy, in heaven, will we have a triple stroller? Or will there be a seat? Well, she may not have said triple.
Yeah.
But, will there be a seat? What will we do with our stroller for my brother? And even now, she will just so sort of, it's just such a hope when she reminds me.
Yeah.
It's never said with sadness.
Yeah. Isn't that funny?
And when my mom told me about her loss, I was really excited. I was like, there was another sibling. And now, had she had that baby, she would have never had me. But it doesn't matter. But I was really excited that there was, I was like a middle schooler. So I would call it I have an older it, and not to.
It's like when we talk about heaven.
Yeah.
The girls get so excited about
it's just so pure.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it has been such a blessing in our house that miscarriage has been openly discussed.
Yes.
And that loss and death have been openly discussed. And it has helped me heal. And I pray that it gives my girls a clear view as they become mothers. Because I think one thing I lacked was, and I think society's bad at this, and I want to fight against this message. I also really had a message that I could control my fertility.
Yes.
And so I believed that as soon as I was ready to have a baby, I was going to have a baby.
Right. I'm with you 100%.
And I wish I would have, of course I knew miscarriage was possible, but I wish I would have known that my fertility was not something I could take for granted.
It's just so heartbreaking. I think that's such an important point to share.
Yeah. And I pray my girls, if that is where their life takes them, I pray that they're aware that their fertility is something that's very precious and something that can't be taken for granted. And I pray that our story, and I think that circles around in a lot of directions. It is very precious. It's also something you can't idolize. That it is something that is a challenge. That it is something we have to sort of hold dear, but not, again, if mothering is where you're called to be, that and maybe you're married and mothering isn't, that it's sort of this, and I know women whose only children were miscarried. And you have to find a way to reconcile that, or, so I think it's, in a perfect world, we would be aware of imperfection.
Right.
And have some way to have reconciled.
And that's why I'm thankful. I guess there's a lot of awareness around fertility. I guess I feel that way.
I think that's gotten better.
It's gotten better. But I feel like my daughters, especially, they see, some people just can't have children, and so they're aware of all the different obstacles that
I think
we face.
I think that's good. I do. I think it can be a challenging conversation to have, but I think that fertility was not something I thought about or talked about as a teenager.
It was kind of don't
get pregnant.
You don't get pregnant. Yeah.
was like the one fertility knowledge.
Oh boy.
And it wasn't only that, but it kind of was.
It's kind of like I don't know, fear. I don't know.
Don't get pregnant. But I think that also gave me some sort of internalized understanding that like my job was to not get pregnant. Otherwise I would just get pregnant. And then when staying pregnant was hard.
Yeah.
It was hard. Yeah. To sort of fight that world message.
Mm-hmm.
That was really hard. Another thing I think in a perfect world, we'd be able to talk about miscarriage, to be able to talk appropriately. And all of these, I think, too, I think there's some pushing boundaries of what's comfortable and uncomfortable and appropriate company and appropriate settings. But that doesn't mean it can't be done and shouldn't be done. And especially between that mother-daughter relationship, the sister relationship, the friend relationship, that friends feel comfortable talking to each other. That just that open, deep communication between parties that should be intimate and open and deep, and older women and that relationship with providing, and which I think leads to sort of that next is that women will be prepared. Yes. I said this in our last episode, but I was so unprepared, so naive.
So how would you suggest?
Well, that's where I think our education and resources absolutely prepare. And even our resources serve as preparation, not just physical preparation, but I had no idea what was about to happen to my body. And I felt like my doctor, I think doctors could and should do better on this. I was told that a miscarriage would be like a heavy period.
Yes. I feel like that's the classic line. It's like a period.
It was not.
It was not. No.
I've never. If it is like a period, I mean, I had my third miscarriage was very, very early, and it was kind of like a period. But I was told after an 11-week miscarriage, it was going to be like a period.
You know.
If you're having periods like that, please go to your doctor. There may be other problems.
Yeah.
I just can't. It just makes me mad. And how many women I've talked to who have said, "Oh," and then the next line: every miscarriage is different. Well, yeah, but every birth is different. You still tell me what's going to happen to my body, and I think,
and what a blessing, almost in disguise, that we'll be able to share our knowledge with our daughters, if they ever embark on miscarriage.
Yeah, and that the information is out there. I just can't believe, like, I tried to, like, what's going to happen to my body? And I just never got, like, clear answers. And in talking with other women, I realized, like, yeah, every miscarriage is different. Like, I didn't end up in the hospital. Both of my miscarriages were missed miscarriages. I didn't start bleeding. At the same time, there's still this, like, consistency that your body is going to bleed and contract until the baby's out.
Yeah.
And that might be extreme.
Yeah. I think I was given a time frame, like when to expect. I took misoprostol, so, you know.
That gave some
but it's
control.
Yeah. But I was told, you know, it could be like 2 hours, it could be 6 hours. And it's kind of like, well, that's kind of broad.
Oh, yeah. And then they just send you home.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that doctors and medical providers would prepare more with information. And I do think our kits help with that and can help providers do that. I felt really prepared in terms of, like, what were my options? Like, here's what a DNC is. You can have expectant management here. But I didn't feel prepared with, like, when I choose expectant management, this is what's going to happen to my body. And I think there's some level, like, are you ever prepared for birth? No, but I sat through a whole day class for my live births. And honestly, my home miscarriage was more like my first birth.
Yeah.
Than it was like, and I had never had a live birth, so I didn't know that. And then talking to women who've had live births and then miscarriages have said, oh, yeah, like, I recognized it. So stop. In a perfect world, we will not say miscarriage is like a heavy period.
Yeah.
It might sort of be, some of them. It was not. I don't hemorrhage with a heavy period.
Yeah.
I didn't hemorrhage, but
I wish you could see our faces.
we're yes, we're annoyed. So what else? Prepared. I think a lot of this is a conversation of prepared, aware in relationship.
Mm-hmm.
I think in a perfect world, we would be free to honor and memorialize our babies.
Mm.
And I think we are free to do that, but I don't think we're equipped to do that. Like, we're literally free and like, it's not illegal.
Right.
But I didn't know I could get my baby back.
Yeah, I feel like there's kind of a missing sense of honor.
Yeah. I had no idea. Well, with my first baby, I said, what will happen to the body? And the doctor said, it'll be thrown out with the medical waste.
Mm-hmm.
And I was young and it was my first pregnancy and I didn't fight it. Now I think I'd be like, no, it won't be.
Mm-hmm.
I'll take my baby things.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how that would go, but I'd be less compliant. With my second, I turned it over for testing. But then I never asked, like, can I have it back? How do I get it back? And then we've talked about this. Our most visited blog is how can I bury my miscarried baby?
Mm-hmm.
So no, but because then once you have the body, if you can figure out how to get, keep, or have the body, then no one knows what to do with the body.
Mm-hmm.
So I think in a perfect world,
It's interesting for me to think back. My doctor pushed for me to do this at home. And I wonder if that was a reason why.
yeah,
I don't know. Who knows? But, I just remember her saying like, oh, well, you're at 10, like between 10 and 11 weeks, so you could go do this at home. It's more private and personal.
mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah. And having that information. Yeah. So the burial would be normalized, I think, is part of what I'm saying.
Yes.
The burial and memorializing, and that would be normalized. And I think it could look different. I think it could be the return of the baby. I don't necessarily want, it can be really expensive to buy a plot and open ground.
Mm-hmm.
But there's some hospitals doing really beautiful things, and columbariums are a real option. And there's hospitals that will do a ceremony for the ashes, that they sort of do a joint burial, but then honor each individual body. There are ways that either the hospital could do it. There are ways that the individual could be more equipped and educated. And I also think in a perfect world, part of that miscarriages would be recognized legally, actually. I'm going to say that as death.
Yeah.
I'm not saying, I don't want to get into why that's complicated or not complicated, but death certificates are not handed out for pre-20-week losses.
Mm-hmm.
And England actually just instituted, it's not a legal death certificate, but instituted. It's not a legal death certificate, but a recognition certificate of life and death.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's
like it can warp a mom's mind, because like there should be validation in life, right? I mean that, the baby that I lost was a human being, right?
Mm-hmm. And recognizing miscarriage as a death is, I absolutely think we would have more. That we did a whole episode. If you want to go back to, we did a whole episode on the UK recommendations that recently came out. And I will say, I won't go through all those because you can listen to that episode, but I think they do a really good job of moving the needle toward what we're talking about here. What does appropriate and good care for mothers and babies and families look like? And so I'm excited to see how those play out as they get implemented. And it's a lot of the things we were talking about. Better receptacles for the body, better information on what to do with the body. Parents can apply for the certificate of acknowledgement. I think all of those things are really thoughtful, laying out. I think one of the hard things about miscarriage is our mission is to, like, maybe there will be a day that science advances to the point where we eradicate miscarriage. But right now, the reality, but we're never going to eradicate death.
Right.
In this world. And maybe we can limit and reduce miscarriage. But unfortunately, most miscarriages are of unknown cause or chromosomal abnormalities that we don't have a way to fix. And so while I commend the medical science that wants to find ways to have them not stop or not happen, the reality is that as long as we're on this earth, I think miscarriages are with us. At least that's where the science and medical care is now. So that's why it's sort of this, our mission isn't to eradicate miscarriage. Our mission's to figure out how to take care of people while it happens. So I would love to see less miscarriage, but also I think that I should say that in a perfect world of care, it's not a perfect world, miscarriage still exists. But I think in this vision that women don't feel guilty for their miscarriages. That we don't heap on guilt. I think it
That's
comes.
a good one. I think I struggled with that for a long time. I guess just not understanding why.
Yeah, and I think it comes naturally, sort of from the inside out. But that we really, and I think we do a good job of this already, that there's a huge pushback. The message is, it's not your fault. And that women can internalize that. Anything else? I think we've come up with a nice world of care. I like it.
Of a vision of care for the future.
We talked about
generations.
Burial. I think things like funeral practices are appropriate. I don't know that they need to look like whatever fits for you and your family. But that would be normalized. Funerals or prayer services or, graveside memorials, whatever it is, however your family, like I think some of it, this is like a summary of everything we've ever talked about, making mourning normalized and acceptable, making grief normalized and acceptable, and working through those. If there's anything else you all want to add to our perfect world, we would love to hear from you. You can always email us at miscarriagecare@gmail.com. We would, I think something this vision is something that has come together from all of us as we've talked and have we seen what needs to be done. So it all gets rooted back into helping and loving and caring for each other and having the resources and knowledge and community to do that in. So thank you so much for listening. Thank you for listening to Hope Blooms, a podcast from the Early Pregnancy Loss Association.
To learn more about how we and you can support women suffering early pregnancy loss, visit our website at miscarriagecare.com or find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thank you for listening.